Greetings, everyone, and welcome to the weekly live stream for the Restitutor Orbis channel, and I'm your host, Lucius Aurelian, and thank you all Prime Explorers, and all other viewers joining us. We're going to be exploring behind the facade, the methods in which hiding Tartaria is conducted. Now, just to be really clear on this, we are looking at the literal way in which there is a facade that's placed over these structures, but we're also going to look at some other ways, the ways that our minds are affected to where we can potentially interact with these structures exactly in their original organic state, and yet not even be completely aware of what's going on. Now, the first question I have for everybody in this image that you're looking at right now, does anybody care to know what city this is? And really, it could be any city, but you might be surprised because this isn't the city you would really be familiar with. Go ahead and throw out a few guesses. What city are we looking at? Well, you could say any city in the 1800s, I suppose, but what city exactly? Are we in the United Kingdom? Are we in the United States? Where exactly are we? And why is it relevant? And how have we lost these structures? Where have they been? Why do we not see them anymore? Heidi there with our first guess, Chicago. Not a bad guess, Heidi. And it could well be Chicago. Squiggles with London. That's a good one. Kathy, speaks my mind when I first saw it. Not a clue, and I had no clue either. Oh, Heidi with another good guess, Duluth. Yeah. It does kind of look European, doesn't it, Leo? Well, you're right about that part. It is the United States. Surprise, surprise. KC933, Southern U.S., and Vaughn shoots out Des Moines. That's always a good one knowing me, but nope, this is actually West Coast United States. You'd never guess. RB Ventures, Alabama, which is also a good guess. All right, I'll give you one more guess. Anybody else want to venture? Ooh, New York. That's another good one. This is actually Portland, Oregon. And most of these structures, yeah, Heidi says it best, really US? Yes, this is the United States. This is Portland, Oregon. Now, most of these structures are no longer with us. They have been removed, they have been renovated, and that's what you have with our constant progression that we have of urban renewal in the United States, which officially was the 1950s and the 1960s, but let's be honest, it was really World War II onward. Yeah, and I mean, that's exactly my thought as well. There's no way that could be Portland, Oregon. I never would have guessed. I never would have imagined that, but that's exactly what we're working with here. And we think about that as the example in terms of how our minds have been shaped, or you can use the word conditioned, or really our expectations. We could also use expectation management. That's another term that gets bandied about around. We would never expect this on the West Coast. We'd certainly never expect this in Portland, Oregon, and it certainly doesn't exist now in Portland, Oregon. But it's a great way to set the stage for what we're going to be exploring and looking at this evening. And most of these structures were lost during that so-called urban renewal period. Now, there's something else to be aware of. We're jumping from the West Coast United States. This is an artist rendering, I'll use those words loosely, of Paris or Paris in France. And this was before there was a lot of transition going on in Paris, France. Now, you might be surprised to know that the official history says that Paris, France was in a constant state of transition. And the difference between the European cities and the cities in the United States, Canada, not Mexico so much, because Mexico, they do give the timeline. They say, well, Mexico was inhabited by the Spanish and everything that happened there with the conquistadors and all the other terrifying things with the encomienda. They had hundreds of years there. But the United States and Canada, not so much time. In Europe, they had over 1,000 years, so the structures make sense. And yet, when you step far enough back and you look at the big picture, you see that it's actually the same pattern of urban renewal, the pattern of clearing out these old structures to make room for these new structures, and voila, you have it. Look at that, RB with the word terminology there. Portland, portal to the land. I don't wonder on that one. Maybe I'll have to watch Goonies again. But anyways, when you take a look at how these structures are concealed or hidden, it's not just in the obvious format of putting a physical facade, although we do have examples of that as well. Hey, Clara, good to see you. Thank you for joining us. And so what happened to Paris? Well, officially, the older buildings were torn down, the blocks were realigned, and they built newer structures, or so they tell us. And that's the same pattern and process that's repeated across the land. And it even includes Bastion, Boston, yes. And what you tend to have are old world buildings that now have these, we'll just say, very definitive, very representative of the Fifth Era glass and steel structures. Yes, it almost seems like you're looking at two entirely different worlds that are overlapping, and maybe in a way you are. Now, people who are with the mainstream account will simply tell you it's progress, and it's the end result of capitalism. Although, fortuitously, it also happens to be the end result of communism. We don't want to spend money on things. Things have to be constructed on the cheap, therefore we can maximize our profit. Things have to be constructed on the cheap, therefore we can maximize government control, depending on what government system we have. I find it rather interesting that it happens to yield the same result. But what you have here is this amalgamation of these two entirely different eras that it suddenly becomes, you get used to seeing these structures in this format. And of course, we know how these newer structures usually are. They are much taller, even though they are much less detailed, and certainly do not have the effort or the same type of construction material within them. Now, is that to say that there weren't taller buildings in the Fourth Era? No, there most definitively were taller buildings, but were many of them lost over time to reset and the subsequent conflicts and the so-called reset liquidation that followed? Very likely. But this is what we're left with now. Now, I'll give Boston credit. At least they're leaving the old world building as the tallest building. And Madison, Wisconsin does the same thing with their state capital, even though, again, the official history says that's the fifth state capital in Madison, Wisconsin, and therefore it is the definitive old world building. Now, we go to our first topic, our first subject, and it takes us to the great city of Cincinnati. We return to Cincinnati. Yeah, I think a lot of people would much rather have old world architecture there, Leo. I know I certainly would. So, but this is actually referred to as the Chong Incorporated building. Now, in recent efforts to renovate Cincinnati, what we found out, and it's only called the Chong Incorporated building because that's the company that owns it. The building, the original framework that you can see in this image, was constructed, according to the official history, in the 1890s. Of course, when else would it be? And in the 1950s, during this period of urban renewal in the United States that, of course, befell Cincinnati, much like it did everywhere else, somebody decided they were going to build a brick facade around the structure. And if you think about this, this is the very literal interpretation of how the old world has been concealed. Now, if you look a little bit more closely here in this image, you will see that there are some bona fide, interesting old world structures. Perhaps even this building over here is a full old world structure, maybe even the entire block. Cincinnati's very interesting. And the official history says, Germans did it all and don't ask any more questions. Okay, the Germans all came. They didn't decide to hang out around New York City. They went to the inland because it makes sense, the interior, and set up shop in Cincinnati, and they built all these incredible structures. But why exactly would somebody in the 1950s decide to build a brick facade around a building that was already 60 years old? Why exactly would you go about doing that? Given the times, you think it would be cheaper just to tear down the building, and of course with building codes, which yes, did apply, albeit in different formats in the 1950s, you would just do that. But this is rather surprising because we actually see signs of more advanced architecture that's underneath the brickwork. So it's definitive proof for the eyes, and you can certainly find many images of this structure that will tell you exactly what this is. That this is an old world building that someone literally put a brick facade over and around. And yeah, I think Kathy says it best. Cincinnati is a fun city. And Polly, exactly what the facade was designed for, concealment. Yes, it's in the title, isn't it? The definition of the word facade. Oh, that's a good one there, Lev. Facelifts. Yeah, and they were constantly doing facelifts and renovations as well. So has to look the part. So this is one image, and here's what you can see on the block. And you can see how this bricking, this facade wall that was constructed, makes this building look very nondescript. It doesn't stand out at all. It's something you wouldn't even pay attention to. But when you remove the bricks, suddenly you see it, the decorations in the walls, the beams, the more advanced construction material. Now, official explanation will be it was just a very cheap job that was done in the 1950s. There were different things going on with economic times, and that's how we explain this. Now, you look at some of the closer images. I'm so glad that we have our modern safety standards here with our construction crew, or perhaps I should say our renovation crew. Hey, RB, thank you so much for that. We could totally reconstruct the old world buildings. Yes, absolutely, we could. It seems like we're struggling to even, how shall we say, unmask them from what's always been around. Hey, Chassis, good to see you. How many buildings have they done this to? Well, you might be surprised. It could be hundreds, it could be thousands, and who really knows? I mean, it's really up there in terms of what's happening with which structures this actually transpired with. But you look here in this part of the image, and you can actually see how the bricks are just simply put right over the original beam and the original design, the old leaf motif that we have, our old world symbolism that we have. What exactly was this material? I'm not entirely sure. But clearly it was something very resilient, something very durable, as we have with old world structures. And that's why in the 1950s, somebody said, sure, just put some bricks around it. It will be fine. It will last for hundreds, thousands of years. I mean, would you take a current building that was just built in, say, 2010 and put bricks around it and feel good about it? Would you feel good doing that with that nice glass and steel building in Boston? Hey, let's just put some bricks around it. We'll have it be a load-bearing structure because glass holds up bricks really well, doesn't it? And I'm not trying to be facetious, but I mean, would you even think that? Would that thought even cross your mind? But if you knew beyond any shadow of a doubt, or if you had an assessment that, yes, that is a very solid foundation, that is a solid structure that is constructed with materials such as this, that even after all these years is still quite resilient, then yes, just put your bricks around it. Now, keep in mind, you're looking at an image after the structure, according to the official chronology, is already over 130 years old, and that's a conservative estimate. Now, what exactly was this structure originally? Why did they decide to do this, and what does it represent? Now, there you go, the symbol, Sean, classical. And that's what we have, those motifs, those designs that we don't always pick up on. And what are they really representing, and what do they really mean? Yes, Dustin, Portland cement. That old concept of Portland cement and the different types of cement and what really happened. And of course, going back to our famous Roman concrete. And our theories that there's probably many different construction materials that were informed are masonry construction materials, but are an entirely different material. Now, whether they were created through some alchemical process or some more advanced technology, we just don't know. Sooner West, so Bricktown in Oklahoma City could be something totally different. Absolutely. All the way down to the foundation, the walls, the floors, up to the roof. And who knows what's been modified, because remember, we also have renovation that's constantly occurring with these old world structures, at least ostensibly. And so that's what we have. And, we see our old symbol here, our little leaf motif, of course, in our cartouche symbol, because what else would we have? And here you can get another look at it. You can see how the brick is just right in front of the old wall. So it's a very intriguing example. It's very intriguing that something like this would be so in our faces, but I'm under the impression that this isn't that grand of a building. I mean, it is a genuine old world building, but in terms of it being large or ornate, it's not something that's going to get a lot of attention. Oh, it was just some 1890s building. We put some brick around it, and that's that. But you look at some different angles, and again, you get the impression of just how ornate and detailed this structure was. This is the 1890s. Look at these grooves right here. So going beyond the motifs and the designs, just the little grooves here, a sign of detailing in the construction, something that we would expect to be beyond the capabilities of the 1890s. Well, of course, it's not beyond the capabilities of the 1890s. We were churning out beautiful county courthouses, state capitals, and let's not forget those impressive World's Fairs. Chicago, St. Louis, Buffalo, and so many that followed. It was so easy to construct things. Of course, we also say that those structures in those World's Fairs or those expositions were temporary. This is clearly not a temporary structure because, one, it's still standing, and two, in the 1950s, they decided to put bricks around it. And so it really gives you this in-your-face concept of mystery and trying to ascertain exactly what was going through the decision makers or the policy makers when this all went down in Cincinnati. Now, you may recall that Cincinnati is one of the very early city explorations that this channel did. And let's just say it had quite a visceral response from many viewers. So, anyway. Hey, Crypto Alchemist, good to see you. And yes, please hit that like button for all of you joining us. So, yeah, Cyborg Ninja, I mean, it really becomes a skeleton, the very bones of the building that can still stand up and is still very impressive to this day. So, well, and that's what we think, Sky Sage, that bricks are fired, but are they fired or was there a different kind of brick? Because there's also that assessment in terms of different sorts of bricks and how the construction and the quality of construction of the bricks themselves and really any construction materials seem to vary. In other words, when you actually test what's really out there or try to assess it, it seems to be very different than what your expectations would be. Certainly they are different than mine. Gehard says they still melt. Yeah, for the most part they do, and maybe all this material did, but what kind of forces were actually required to do that? Well, we do have an example we're going to take a look at and try to get an idea. Michael, exotic materials in the bricks? Maybe, or maybe the older bricks were actually constructed out of more exotic materials themselves, to include the larger scale blocks that we see a lot of. Now we're not even talking about bricks, and that's what makes it very interesting. So a couple other examples, you look closely at this. This is a higher definition image. And of course, I always have to be careful using higher definition images, but you can see it. The motifs here with the 3 cartouches and the leaf motif. And again, giving you the impression of something that's much more advanced, much beyond what the brick construction was that went around it in the 1950s. And so something that really stands out and gets your attention. Now, again, I think this was allowed. This was transmitted through the media because it's, rather modest old world building. It's not going to shake any feathers that much or really cause anybody to seriously question things. But for those of us who are doing this all the time, this is a very definitive example. And this is a literal example of putting a facade over an old world structure to hide it. And what other reason would there be for doing this? And when you look at these different images, that's exactly what you get. Remove the bricks, remove the old, very, very cheap duct system, and voila, you have the framework of a very advanced structure. Now, there's all kinds of interesting structures that came in and out of Cincinnati, and that's why Cincinnati is an interesting place to explore, such as the Bellevue House. I think it's misspelled here on the image, but that's okay. Yes, this looks like Jabba's Palace Revival style, I guess, here, that's on this very interesting ridgeline. I always appreciate these old images because they give you the impression that there's much more going on. I mean, what's going on here below the structure in this hill that it's on? Very, very bizarre, as though this was all excavated out in a way, and maybe it was. We had to build the road and put the light poles in there. But what exactly is the structure and what is it made out of? This is very interesting. This is something that I wish that was still standing today. And we've seen this example before with these cylindrical buildings. Now, granted, there are still some cylindrical houses that you can see out there. They're not very well made, but you kind of have everything here. The cylindrical multi-level structure and then some nice towers behind it. Just very, very interesting, the Bellevue House. We'll take another look at that when we do Cincinnati Part 2. And then you may remember this, the City Hall, the courthouse, and this very impressive church constructed in the mid 1800s by all those Germans that were just overrunning Cincinnati, even before the German wave of immigration to the United States. So the Germans were so keen to get to Cincinnati that they left Germany before they had reason to leave Germany, the social revolution of 1840s, and they built this incredible church. Not exactly in German style that we see of those grand cathedrals, but this looks like something else, a more neoclassical style. But, they're innovative and they were motivated so they could really do anything. And so it's just an example. There are still old world structures they don't bother to hide in Cincinnati. They just accept. They're municipal buildings. So look at that as a different kind of facade, assigning the function to the structure. And then that's imprinted in our minds. It's a courthouse. It's a city hall. It's a church. It's a municipal auditorium. What other terminology that we have? And suddenly you're thinking that, and voila. And thank you very much for that, Robert. I appreciate that. So, yeah, exactly. And so that's what you have with the case of Cincinnati. And even this commerce structure, that's this giant castle. And yet you look on past it and look, we have a very, very convincing construction photo of the commerce castle. So clearly we don't need to ask any more questions on this one, do we? No, we don't. In fact, I'll just say that this is one of the most convincing construction photos I think I've ever seen. And we really don't need to ask any more questions about it, do we? So anyway, that's all we really have for Cincinnati at this time. But it's very, very interesting that that is where we have this structure that's revealed. This structure, the Chong Incorporated building. Now, it's been many other things, a Kroger, and you can look at the timeline if you're so inclined for what functions we've assigned to it. But that's the story of Cincinnati, and that tends to be what we have. So let's move on and go to the Call building in San Francisco. Now, you may remember this one. We've looked at it a few times before, but this is probably one of the most, how shall we say, egregious examples of what happens with these structures as they are modernized. So, does anybody remember this structure? In San Francisco, this very, very beautiful early 1890s skyscraper. Let me make sure I go full image here. And I'll even hide the banner so you can see it. Does everybody remember this particular structure? Hey, J Series, welcome and welcome to the new members. And again, thank you for that, Robert. So, cool building, Singer Tower, all named to do with the vocals. Yes. So this was called the Call building originally. It has a more generic name now, but yeah, exactly. Cool tower. The things that we can do in the 1890s. And a couple of the details on it. I mean, really what you have is a dome with a cupola on it, and then 4 subsidiary domes. I don't know why I'm getting some Iowa State Capitol vibes here. 5 domes. Really, you could say 6 domes. Little dome up there, 4 little domes around there, that's 5. And then the big dome, that's 6 domes. That's pretty impressive. San Francisco, 1890s. And look at how extensive these floors are, and all the decorations all the way down to the base of the structure. And then again, you see the larger, more advanced block construction. You see the columns that they were somehow able to pull out. Now, of course, this was before the fire, earthquake, disaster, whatever the heck befell San Francisco in 1906. Yes, I know officially it's an earthquake, but we've got accounts of the Army going in there and creating fire breaks. And how'd they create the fire breaks? They destroyed the buildings. So yes, this is what this structure looked like when it was the Call building. Well, there was some renovations done on it in the 1930s, and it's now the Central Tower of San Francisco. Ah, yes, look at that. Just beautiful and just incredible, isn't it? The things that we do to our structures. And of course, now it's just a nondescript, very bland and blasé tower. Really, you can't even call it a skyscraper anymore. But yes, that's exactly what they do. Kathy says it quite well there. Scalped. Yes, scalped, destroyed, wrecked, renovated. That's what we'll be told. Well, of course it's a cube because, what else are you going to do but have a nice cube like that? So, yeah, good one there, Griff's Report. Where did the dome go? Well, believe it or not, we do actually have some images that show the progress of what happened to the renovation of this particular tower. So let's look at some more images here. And so here we have a ground photo from San Francisco in the very early 1900s that just shows you how incredibly beautiful and ornate this 6-dome tower was. Yeah, I won't count it again and bore you, but again, look at some of the decorations and the motifs here on each of these floors. And think, they did this in the 1890s. Now, yes, I'm well aware that officially this is not nearly as tall as our modern, very non-discrete glass skyscrapers. But still, you don't see us building tall buildings like this anymore with domes and cupolas on them, because we're all about saving money now. That's the explanation that we're given. Of course, it's got columns at the bottom and it's got very large foundation blocks on it. So very, very intriguing. Why would anybody ever want to go away from this is the real question. And I mean, if you still had the structure and it was already built, why not use it? Well, you know what happened. And here we have our destruction photo or post-destruction photo or post-reconstruction photo, because you already see them building another structure here after the 1906 earthquake, the conflagration, and then of course the United States Army coming in trying to save the city by creating fire breaks and effectively destroying buildings. And then of course we also have the account of how the fire chief himself was unfortunately killed at the outbreak of the fire because of various events. Although when you look at the Call building, it looks like it came out of the fire all right. There doesn't really seem to be a lot of damage to it. So you think they could just get in there, repair it, and get that building going? Look, we have a skyscraper that survived. Let's roll with it. You can actually find publications that'll tell you what an eyesore this skyscraper was, and even how ridiculous this whole skyscraper push in the 1890s was. Isn't that intriguing? Why would anybody say that? Why would anybody even think that? But you can actually find media articles that'll say that. Now, granted, you can find media articles that'll say essentially anything because, diverging opinions seem to be what the media is all about. I'm sure it's just fortuitous because they're trying to tell us the truth, right? But, as always, as I'm famous of saying, make of it what you will. So moving on past this particular destruction image, you can find this earlier image from San Francisco from 1900. And again, you can see the Call building in all its glory. We also have the famous Onion Dome Church nearby and many other very advanced structures in San Francisco. Now, of course, San Francisco is one of the most complicated accounts, stories, records that we have of a city that just seemed to prop up out of nowhere. Now, it's explained by the gold rush. It's explained by the pioneering spirit of all the people that descended on California in the 1800s. Where was that pioneering spirit for all the unfortunate people that got pushed out of the Dust Bowl in the 1930s? Well, they were just there to work. They weren't there to build cities out of nothing and to go after gold. But again, you look in at it and you can see the opulence and the ornate detail in this structure. Now, no one's building buildings like this today. Now, someone might be trying to replicate it in some way, shape, or form, but no one's going to give you a bid for a building like this. No one's going to say we're going to build a structure like this. No one's going to build onion top domes on their churches anymore. So you can see that what we really have here is a genuine old world structure that has been altered over time. And how exactly was it altered? Well, again, it's that usual story, record, account, whatever you want to call it, the official history of a fire, of an earthquake that caused fires, and then the army trying to save the day destroyed many buildings. Now, what exactly happened here? It's very, very strange because you do see all these fires. And of course, we have this relentless account of fires that everything was just so flammable or prone to catching fire. Even the structures that were made out of what we're informed are masonry construction and the concrete available at the time. And even going away from the Call building, look at some of the ornate detail here in this structure. I mean, it's just really impressive when you look at all the details of the subsidiary structures. It really gives you the impression that every single building they had was very well decorated and laid out. Even though they were building the city very quickly, they needed the facilities. Wasn't that what the official history said? I'm not really sure. It's just very intriguing. Yeah, Mark says it best right there, spontaneous combustion. And maybe that's what they need to tell us. It's spontaneous combustion. So anyways. So let me make sure I get the banner back up here. So going on, it's still the Call building. It has not been converted to the central tower yet. But here you see in this other image of it, it appears to be on fire. Although, again, I'm kind of reminded of that photo of the Iowa State Capitol when it was on fire. How interesting that there's flames actually shooting out the portal window. What exactly did they do in this structure? How exactly does an earthquake cause that? Well, they had lots of candles up there. The earthquake knocked over the candles and that started fires. Maybe, I guess. Was there something else? Was it an early rudimentary power system? Were they trying to wire the building? They didn't know what they were doing, and the earthquake just caused spontaneous flames to just shoot out the window. Is there something off about the photo? I don't know. But you just see something like this, and it just, again, causes you to ask more questions. And, of course, this structure right here, which is very impressive and well decorated. And, again, no one's building structures like this now. What exactly does this symbol mean? Is this the symbol of California in the United States in the 1890s? Was that Emperor Norton's special sigil? Who the heck knows? Yeah, look up Emperor Norton. That's an interesting character. The Emperor of the United States. Yes, according to the official history, he was an official historical figure. Look up the exploration robots at Tartaria. But then you look at some of the other images, and again, it gives you the idea of what the real construction material was. And I mean, looking at this image, we can see here that this appears to be genuine concrete, cement, or something else, maybe something even more advanced. The San Francisco Call, so we're at the foot of the building. He'll occupy these premises about May 21st, 1906. He'll, with a larger and better equipment than ever before. Interesting writing, isn't it? But everything around San Francisco is interesting. What exactly is going on over here? Not really sure. But again, you can look at some of the details in this. I mean, look at the base of these columns with these figures. Who in the heck is doing this in the 1890s in the United States? Very, very impressive lifelike figures that we always see. Well, yes, I know we had artisans and craftsmen, and apparently the people as part of the gold rush, after the gold rush, they decided to come there and go to San Francisco because their talents would be needed. And remember, there was never a master logistician that's ever mentioned because, logistics we can just hand wave away. It's really just that easy, apparently. So, yeah, Chassis says it best. Look how large the arch door is compared to the man. And I mean, this is where you can really see the scale. And remember, this is the base of this building. So, yeah, I think Kathy says it very well here. Our civilization didn't build that building. That's the impression I'm under as well. Anyways, so let's take a look at another one. Now this took some doing to find this. So let me make sure you can see this okay, and I'll try to get this in the picture. They actually have the transformation images of turning the call building to Central Tower. Let me make sure you can see this as well as I can show it to you. And maybe what I'll do is I'll reformat this and post this up on the channel page because it's very interesting for everybody to see. But here you can see the fire that hit the call building in 1906, whether that was the candles or the electrical system being affected by the earthquake or the army going in there deciding to do a fire break and then it just didn't work, I mean, sometimes the army tries to destroy things that it says it's going to destroy and it just doesn't succeed. Like that M1 Abrams tank they tried to destroy in the Battle of Baghdad. They just couldn't blow it up, so they repaired it and then it took part in the assault. Yes, true story. So 1937, we can see that it still had the old structure to it. And yet then here in 1937, now keep in mind, for those of you who are not familiar, this is during the Great Depression in the United States. This just isn't during the Great Depression. This is also the Great Recession that occurred in the middle of the Great Depression. Yes, there was a Great Recession that occurred in the late 1930s and 1937. So as if the economy wasn't already bad enough, then there was a recession that occurred in the middle of the Depression. People don't talk about that. But somehow, some way, they had the resources to, quote unquote, renovate this building. Because remember, there were always resources available when they needed them, especially financial resources. So that's why I'm really not buying the excuse that we don't have the money to do things today. You like that? And look at this. They completely removed the dome, and then we renovate it to this very schlocky structure that we have now that's very, very uninspired and very block-like. Now, I'm going to be honest. Do I believe that our civilization could pull something like this off? Yes, actually, I do believe this is something that we could do over a period of time. Now, was there something else going on? Was the structure changed in a different way? Or was this all about concealing something that they didn't want people to see? Because remember, this was right before World War II. And things got really, how shall we say, questionable during World War II. With very rare exception, the United States did not build any large structures during World War II. It did during the Great Depression, but not during World War II. So, again, make of it what you will. Hey, Tara, good to see you, and thanks for joining us. And so this series of images, allegedly, yes, I'm using that word directly, documents exactly what happened with the renovation and the transference of the call building to Central Tower. May as well just call it Plane Tower, Hey, Sub-Zero, now, Plane Zero. Killian. So yes, that's the closest you're going to find to it. And it was very difficult to find those images. But you see some other images from the fire, and that gives you the impression that there was more damage to the structure. Of course, there were a lot more damages to the surrounding structures, it appears. And yet it looks very familiar to what we see with the construction of things such as the Iowa State Capitol, where it looks like the building's been subjected to fire, all the windows are blown out. I mean, is that exactly what happened? Did the earthquake cause all the windows to fall out? Was it the fire? What exactly happened here? I mean, that's why we have to ask those questions, because the images don't really seem to tell us the full story, at least as we understand it. So, oh, here's a good one. 64 million Siberia spent on renovation of its train station. Well, of course, Michael, there's always money available when we need it. And remember that governments can always spend in deficit. I mean, that's just a modus operandi now in these modern times. You can go into debt all you want to. Yeah, I'm with Clara here. It does look like war, doesn't it? And that's the impression that we're left with. Of course, there's an official explanation behind it. It was an earthquake and the army had to go in there and they tried to save the city by creating fire breaks, by destroying buildings. That's what the official account says. There's some other odd images too. Shows you a lot of very fine debris and rubble. So very interesting. And then, of course, our famous diagonal cuts, which we always see ad nauseum. So again, I'm really not sure what to make of this or what exactly this represents. How accurate are these images? How chronologically ordered are these images? And can we take the images at face value? Well, at the end of the day, it all comes down to you and what you assess. I will tell you that they're not always the easiest thing to dig up. And yet then we have other images that show the Call building as it was on fire. Although they're very odd images. I mean, look at how the fire looks. Is this a black and white image, but then the fire is in color? Is this like a comic book, Grendel, black, white, and red? You know, where you just see red? Well, here it's call building, black, white, and fire. I mean, I just don't even know what to make of it. It's so strange. I mean, yes, you could say maybe some artist touched it up to really give the impression that, yes, there was a fire. We have smoke, so there must be fire. So I'm going to color some fire in the windows. I mean, who the heck knows what these photos went through? And is this the original photo, or did the photo end up in a book and then someone altered it in a book? You know, I'm not even saying there has to be any sort of intentional design behind any of this. A lot of the stuff could just happen fortuitously. And I'm quite frankly of the mindset that's exactly how it happens, because the fewer people know, yeah, Jared says it right here, painted on photos. The fewer people know and are aware of it, then there's really nothing to even be hidden. Ignorance is bliss, as they say. Well, nobody knows and no one's going to question it. It's in a history book. It's in a photo book. It must be real. Oh, that's a good one there, Sean P. Towering Inferno. I'll have to watch that one again. It's been a hot minute since I've seen that one. So, and Leo thinks it's legit, and it may well be. All I'm getting at is we just don't know for sure. You know, I mean, we have clues and we try to put the picture together for what's really going on. And that's just what makes it very, very interesting. The mighty Call building in San Francisco. Now, again, here you can see a post-reconstruction photo here. And again, look at this, these diagonal cuts. What, from a fire, from an earthquake? Very, very interesting. Now, maybe this structure over here might be a little bit more of a legitimate collapse, but it's very intriguing to me. And then just the amount of debris that's actually on the ground. But don't worry, the streets are clear. I always wondered how they kept the streets so clear. Very, very interesting. Well, you know, maybe the army came through there and, you know, they had their bulldozers that were attached to horses. I mean, they did have rudimentary steam-driven heavy vehicles, but how many did they really have available? And when you look at what's really going on, it's quite intriguing. And you can see here the Call building does look burned out at this point. It looks like it's completely uninhabited. But yes, we need to do away with those domes and those towers because, you know, they just don't fit in with our modern view of America, especially in the 1900s or the 20th century. So maybe that's the explanation behind it. Not really sure, but that's what makes it very, very intriguing. Anyway, as we transition out of the Call building, please hit the like button. We're now going to take a look at a more contemporary example and a, maybe we should say, rural example, because, you know, we like to look at cities. So we've looked at Cincinnati, we've looked at San Francisco, but now we're going to take a look at the rural area of America. And we're going to take a look at some Midwest County courthouses. Yes, the courthouses that tend to fall victim to this mentality of facading. And where are our travels going to take us? Well, we're going to go to the middle of the Midwest. And let me get this image up for you. Of course, I can't resist looking at some courthouses. I'm a sucker for courthouses. So this particular courthouse, and don't worry, this is just the postcard, I know. I've got some better images for you, is in Albert Lea, Minnesota, the Freeborn County Courthouse. Now, Albert Lea, not a very large city, barely over 10,000 if I recall the last population count. And it's known for being the intersection of Interstate 90 and Interstate 35. That's about all it's known for. But they once had this very impressive courthouse. Now, this courthouse does survive, but it most certainly doesn't survive in this format, with this impressive tower and this clock tower, and then, of course, these very unique and wondrous domes on it. And you can see this is how it looks in its modern format. Let me make sure you can see this image. And you can see what they've done. They've removed the Great Tower. Yes, Albie, the city is called Albert Lea, although it's spelled with an A. And navigation will pronounce it Albert Lea, but I do know it's pronounced Albert Lea. At least last time I went there, that's the way the locals were pronouncing it. But, you know, if you're from Albert Lea, nothing against the city, let me know and, you know, make fun of my pronunciation. It's all good. So, anyway, yeah, Griff's report has a way of saying it. You know, they took down the nice towers, they took down the nice domes. You've got the baseline structure still there, but it just doesn't have the same presence that it used to. It doesn't have the same impact when you look at it, when you remove those domes. And that's what we tend to have. That's what goes on when we do these structures in these courthouses. Okay. So this is an older image, and yeah, it's the best quality I can get it. But here you can see in its heyday, and of course it had a really nice house nearby that seemed to be a great old world house. So, and that's the real point behind it. The courthouses are everywhere. Yeah, I don't think it was named after that, Albert Lee, New West Reset, and good to see you. But it'd be funny if it was. Maybe it wasn't. Someone was just trolling Minnesota at that point. So who knows for sure. But keep in mind that we're actually in southern Minnesota. Freeborn County and Mower County, right next to it, are right on the Iowa border. So we're really out in the middle of the Midwestern breadbasket of the United States. So not too far from that Iowa state capital that we spend a lot of time on. But yes, here you can see it, and it's got its little Civil War monument out in front of it because, why wouldn't it? But you can still see there are some remnants in the structure that don't really add up. Some of the decorations here. Now, maybe this is newer brick. I'm not really sure. But look at this intriguing figure. What the heck is this supposed to be? Falkor the dragon from Neverending Story? So is Falkor a symbol of Freeborn County, Minnesota in the 1880s when they originally built this? I don't know. Maybe it's not Falkor, but very, very interesting. You also have some figures that seem to actually be built in what we're informed is red stone, which, by the way, there's really nowhere you can find that in Freeborn County or anywhere nearby. But, they say they got it in Burlington, Iowa, and then just hauled it up to Albert Lee in Minnesota because, easy peasy. I mean, yeah, I guess you could take it up on the train, but then you still have to pull it off the train. So again, still some remnants of the old world, but nowhere near as ornate or as impactful on our eyes as it used to be, with the towers and the domes all removed. You can see where the mighty clock tower was removed and the dome was removed. And there's the usual slew of reasons that's given for why this happened, because it's not safe, because the building was falling apart, so on and so forth. But you go on past this, and this is the actual administrative portion for the courthouse of Freeborn County. Yes, very modern right there, isn't it? Nothing much to see. But then you go back and you look at this image and you can see how it looked in all its impressive glory. Oh, I like the colorized Old Glory up there, United States flag. But you can see this old clock tower that looks really, really old, these old domes on this. And then the original construction that's all there. And it looks like those symbols, those faces, were all there from the start. But when you look at this black and white photo, is that Falkor right there? Yeah, there's Falkor right there. I'm just calling him that. I mean, maybe it's some other figure. Maybe it's a griffin for all I know. That just kind of looks like Falkor from Neverending Story. I'm just kind of spitballing here, but that's what keeps this very, very interesting. So, yeah, clocks, bells, the works. That's right, Sean. They had all that. The focus on cymatics, as it were. But anyway. Well, that's okay, Donk. Thanks for joining us. But you go on past the missing clock towers and everything else, and you look at some of the detail, and you can see that it's always been there. The dragon, griffin motif, Falkor, the faces that are actually above the archway. And yet you see some of the other, look at this, our pine cone of power, as I like to call it. Now, of course, that's just a reference term, but all the symbols are there, and they're always the same. And it doesn't matter whether it's some impressive stock exchange or cotton exchange or whatever fancy name we have for the building, a state capitol here, a church in the United Kingdom, or a courthouse in the middle of Minnesota from the 1880s. They all have the same symbols on them. Very, very interesting. Not the flippin' flags. I'm talking about the symbols that are actually on the building itself. That is no coincidence. Now here's a closer look with the modern image, and here you can see these figures. I mean, these figures don't look like the people we'd expect to see in Minnesota. I mean, maybe they represent that. You look at the settlement of Minnesota and what the official history says, it's quite intriguing. But some very interesting architecture, even the little columns right here in this triangular piece. I mean, you'd say it's a pediment, but maybe it's something else entirely. Is this the original brick? It appears to be the original brick. Well, how is it they could have bricks from the 1880s in Freeborn County, Minnesota, that still last and look pristine to this day? Looks like they really just cleaned them off. It's the only renovation they did. Again, I'm making an assessment. Maybe they did some other renovation that we're not aware of, and I'm sure that's what they'll tell us. But then in this image here from the 1940s, you can see that there was this large factory compound right next to it. Quite intriguing, with a giant smokestack. And isn't it interesting how we always have that pattern that repeats with these municipal structures or these government administrative structures, at least in terms of function? So remember that as part of the facade. So was it really a government administrative structure? Was that what it was originally intended, or did it have some other function entirely? Think back to our concept of reset compounds. And then really try to put yourself back into a completely different civilization, and then all bets are really off. Now, do I think that there were a lot of things that were done ad hoc or done very hastily to prepare for the reset? Yes. And is that the reason why we see these power arrangements? Quite possibly. Again, that's just a theory. I could be completely wrong. I'm just putting ideas out there to try to explain what I see. Oh, yeah. Well, there's always a vanilla sky, Griff, even in the 1940s in Minnesota. Why wouldn't there be? Hey, thank you for that New West reset. I appreciate that. Thank you very much. And welcome to the new members. And so moving on past this, going on to our next series of images that we have, looking at the town of Albert Lea itself. Now, Albert Lea, city in Minnesota, it's gone through its economic downturns. They actually have an abandoned mall there. It's still functional that you can go walk in. Very, very interesting. But this just gives you an idea of what they had in their downtown. Look at this, bell towers, very ornate decorations. And I mean, what would be the point for the St. Paul clothing store? I mean, are we really to believe that the St. Paul clothing store was built with all this impressive construction, all this effort that went into it? Well, no. Now, you'll see this downtown pattern repeated in towns and cities all across the Midwest. You'll see it in the United Kingdom. You'll see it all over Europe. Now, of course, you can explain it easier in Europe because there's a longer official historical timeline, yes. But the United States, it's a lot more compressed, especially once you get west of the Mississippi. And so you're really showing some incredible achievements. Yes, look at this. It would appear that we have some windows down here in slant construction once again. Always slant construction. Mr. Burns' slant construction shows up again. And again, just the small town of Albert Lea. This was what it looked like in the 1940s. Now, these structures do survive to this day, but as you can see, once again, the real ornate parts of them have been renovated and removed, ostensibly because they weren't safe or they weren't structurally sound. And this is what we're left with. So, yeah, exactly. Retired and broke, a castle church down the street. And churches, for whatever reason, do seem to survive with most of the details on them. That's what makes it so intriguing. But moving on past this and seeing this unfortunate town, you can see that there were some other structures that have the same thing. Yes, look at those street level windows that we had to have. Some of the motifs in here, and yet you get the impression that there was once something else that was on top of this little corner tower. Still, you can see some of the interesting patterns with the blocks of the bricks. It's designated a hotel. You still have some faces that are in it, and yet you still see some very interesting line construction. Now, was this just all done with brick or something else? Well, this appears to be larger blocks. Again, all for this very small and modest town of Albert Lea, Minnesota. And yet here, in what is labeled as a gas and electric building, I'm not kidding, we see a structure in Albert Lea that looks exactly like the bare bones modest structure that we saw in Cincinnati that had the facading put over it. So just imagine you could take a structure like this, put some brick around it, and voila, you now have your structure that has been modified, that has been renovated. Yeah, good call out there. Chimneys? Yeah, I'm not exactly sure what we have with this building. It's an electric and power building, and yet it has all these little poles on the top of it. I just don't know what those poles can do. Not going to speculate. Why should I? At least not this exploration. You know where I'm going, don't you? But you add the little motifs, the artistic decorations that for some reason are just put in the structure. I mean, look at this. Right there with the little miniature cartouche or portal. And then very elaborate columns and decorated tops of the columns. Or the pediments, or whatever terminology we have for the columns that are amalgamated with the walls. It's escaping me right now, but that's okay. Yes, look at this. And of course, the historical marker, the plaque on the building. So don't question what the origin of the building was. Oh, look at this. We appear to even have a brick street in Minnesota. So you see, it wasn't just in the southern states, the United States. Yes, in Minnesota, they had a brick street. So isn't that just an impressive little structure with a lot of detailing and decoration? And yet you could very easily see someone putting bricks all around it, facading it, and saying, yes, in the 1950s, it was part of urban renewal. We surrounded it with bricks. And then someone ripping it down later and then revealing what this really actually is. And there you have it. So, anyways. Now, we go by to near Austin, Minnesota. And this is the next town over heading east on Interstate 90. And in Austin, Minnesota, which is the county seat or county capital, however you want to say it, the official term is county seat of Mower, or is it Mower County, Minnesota? I've heard it both. This was an impressive courthouse that was also built in the 1880s. Yes, so There's this story in Moore County, Minnesota. I'll go with the Moore pronunciation right now, where they were trying to decide what town they were going to have the county seat in, and Austin really wanted it. Well, Austin, Minnesota is now famous for being the corporate headquarters of Spam, or Hormel, the Hormel Corporation who produces Spam. I'm not going to tell you what the acronym stands for. You can guess. But yes, in the 1880s, long before the founding of Hormel even, they built this impressive courthouse. Another courthouse that has, you got it, 6 domes on it. Or, maybe I should say 2 domes and then 4 spires on it. Very, very impressive. And yet you can also see the new current courthouse that they built in the 1960s. And of course, they tore this courthouse down in the 1960s because, well, what are you going to do with a courthouse like that in the 1960s? So I'd rather not guess. Austin is home of Spam. Yes, it is. They've got the Spam Museum there. You can still visit it. And don't miss the hog jog in the summer. I'm not kidding. Those are all events in Austin, Minnesota. So I wish I were kidding, but I'm not. Anyways, here's an actual colorized image, and it is very difficult to find good images of this courthouse. I can't imagine why. And again, you can clearly see this is from the 1960s. You can even get the hint of the old world downtown of Austin, Minnesota. Now, here you can really see the discrepancy between the old courthouse and then what would become the new courthouse. Yes, our finest 1960s, 1950s construction capability right there. But why would anybody ever want to tear down something like this? This is a gorgeous, gorgeous building. And you can still see it in other images, whether it's from the 1930s, 1920s, or 1940s, of just how impressive this very unique dome was. This just stands out like a sore thumb. You can even get the idea of how ornate the downtown was. Now, really think about that. How many downtowns have we built from scratch in the mighty United States in the 1900s onward? All these towns and cities were founded sometime in the 1800s. But why is it that all of these were constructed in the 1800s? All the infrastructure was laid down in the 1800s. The streets, the sewers, the water treatment, everything. All the hardest things to do to get a town, a city up and running were done then in the 1800s. I don't know. Maybe you just need to go back and play old school SimCity and you can figure it out. Or just read the historical account, all right? It's very well documented. All right, sure. Even if the timelines don't make any sense, I'll just accept it. Oh, yes, I just thought I would include this. So we actually jump over here to Roswell, New Mexico. I just thought this was a little fun just to look at their courthouse there. And it seems to be missing an L. I thought it was 2 L's in Roswell, but oh well. Maybe they misspelled it at the time, or maybe we just didn't know how to respond at the time. Look at that courthouse. Maybe that's something that they could say that aliens actually helped build. I always love how people try to bring that up in the explorations. It was aliens. It was aliens. Yeah, you got it, KC933. Roswell with 2 L's. I'm with you, but maybe somebody just misspelled it on the postcard. But very, very interesting. We always have these courthouses, and remember, this is nowhere in New Mexico. And what Roswell's famous for. And they've also got the New Mexico Military Institute, one of those very interesting military academies. Yeah, maybe that's the best explanation, Vaughn. It is a UFO that they converted into the courthouse. Maybe somebody should try to float that one. Who knows? Maybe we'll see it. All facetiousness aside. But you go past that and, these random courthouses. And this is the Waseca County Courthouse in Minnesota. So another very impressive one in Minnesota. And what's intriguing about this one is that it has retained a lot of its charm, and it still has its clock tower. Can't quite tell if we got 4 eyes or an IV. Oh, it looks like we got 4 eyes. Of course we do. Who the heck would ever use IV anyway? Well, obviously not the people that were copying the Romans, right? But just interesting that we actually have an intact clock tower here in Waseca. And so that really completes our look at the Midwest and these different courthouses, with the exception of New Mexico. New Mexico is obviously not the Midwest, but they could still build a really nice courthouse there because the aliens helped them, right? I mean, someone should just say that. In any event, so we're going to take a look at something else, and I'm not going to end the exploration just yet. We are going to go on our little 2-minute break here, but prior to going on break, please hit that like button. What we're going to do is there's a couple structures I've wanted to take a look at for a long time, and I figured it would be best to take a look at it with you all and get your feedback on it, because these are structures that really do fall under the theme of facading. In other words, trying to hide their original purpose. And it's very obvious that's exactly what happened. So when we come back from 2-minute break, we're going to take a look at some structures we've never really taken a look at, with one exception. And then you're going to see some examples of other means that are used to openly hide or conceal this old civilization. So see you in 2 minutes and enjoy your break. All right, thank you for sticking around for the 2-minute break, and we're going to take a look at some other interesting structures that show facading, or how things have changed over time. And these are structures that I've wanted to take a look at for some time, and I actually have these in a separate file, so just give me 1 second, and I'm going to pull these up. And we're going to go back to the magical land of California, because this is very, very interesting, although this isn't a part of California that we've really looked at too much before. And let me get this up here. And we're going up to northwestern California, specifically Eureka. And here we have what is known as the Carson Mansion, another one of these impressive 1890s constructions. And what's interesting about the Carson Mansion, and why we don't need to ask any questions about it, is it was a lumber baron who constructed this impressive edifice. Of course, a lumber baron. So, like I say, we don't need to ask any more questions. Whenever we hear of some sort of baron, a lumber baron, a brick baron, we never hear of brick barons, then we know that the structure must be legitimate and the historical account must be accurate, right? Exactly. So what's so intriguing about this structure? They inform us that it is made from redwood. The exterior is made out of redwood. Well, you can't get American chestnut anymore, but I was always interested how in the South they say they have houses that have been lasting for over 200 years, constructed out of wood. At least that's what the official historical account says. So, yeah, that's right, New West Reset, lumber baron. We've got lumber barons. William Carson, not to be confused with Mary Carson from the Thornbirds, but yeah, I always have to make some entertainment reference. But what's so intriguing about this particular house? Well, this is in Eureka, California, way, way up in Northwest California, nowhere near Southern California, Los Angeles, or even San Francisco, way, way up there in Northwest California. And yet, when you look closely at this house, that the exterior is made of redwood, so the official account says, we still see the same devices and the same ornamentation that we see in a lot of the structures. Well, how fortuitous. Now, officially, this is Queen Anne Victorian style, and this is considered the most famous Victorian house in the United States. Ah, yes, Queen Victoria, so famous, so powerful, they were even naming housing and architectural styles after her. in the United States. But here's the interior. And yes, when you look at this interior, you can get the idea why they might want to shoot a science fiction movie here. I mean, yeah, it's all made out of wood, but there's different impressions of what this may look like. So, yeah, there you go, Atom Bomb. Eureka, we struck gold. Yeah, Sky Sage says it very well. Absolutely stunning. And I mean, that's just what you see, a very unique style with these giant portal openings here and all these arches and decorations all over the place in the windows. And I mean, this is just a house. Well, it was a house built for a lumber baron, just like Hearst Castle was built for a media magnate, a baron, an oligarch. Of course, now if, someone's from the United States, we call them a philanthropist, depending who they are. But anyway, you look at some of these older images, though, of the interior of the house, and it gives you a completely different impression. You have to wonder or ask, was there a time when the interior looked very different? Was this something else that also underwent renovation or alteration over time? And usually we'd like to think that it does. Robert, looks like my high school. You do have a very nice high school, Robert. I will say that. It's very, very intriguing. So, yeah, you're right, KC933, and that's not something that we see a lot of. Yeah, Vaughn, I'm actually speechless. This is, with all the things that we look at, isn't it intriguing that we always come across something that we've never seen before and still continues to blow our mind? And I've been doing this for a while now, and yeah, I've never seen a room like that either. I've never seen a layout like that. And yet, when you look at the older images and compare it with the newer images, you have to ask how it's been changed or altered over time. I mean, look at some of these motifs in here and some of these design stylings. Very, very interesting. Interesting decoration. All these across each one of these arches or these portals. And then here, when you look at this particular perspective of the house, you can see that there's variations of the cartouche. So could it have been that this was a legitimate structure? Could this have been a replication of a great structure in the past? Don't really know. We get the impression that it's possible that there were attempts towards the end of the last era to try to replicate the lost abilities that they had. So keep this in mind. In the previous civilization, they knew that they had greater abilities in the past and they recognized it. And they may have tried to build monuments to that or testaments to it, but they couldn't match what they used to be able to do. And that would explain why we have the discrepancies in what we see with the architecture. Now, I have not visited this site in person, so I really don't know if this is in fact wood or if this is some other material. I mean, they inform us it's all redwood, but I mean, who's building houses out of redwood in California today? Good luck with that. But you look at different perspectives and you can see there is a very, dare I say, futuristic, almost scientific appearance to this house that's made entirely out of wood. And something that just seems to defy explanation for what we'd have with the capabilities at the time. So, there you go, Michael. Salvador Dali style. Yeah. You know how much they were going to pay him to play the Emperor in the Alejandro Jodorowsky Dune movie? And I'm sure I mispronounced his name, but that's okay. After you heard what Alejandro Jodorowsky said about Frank Herbert, maybe he doesn't deserve to have his name pronounced correctly. Don't know. I'm just being Dorfus, but that's okay. So, yeah, there you go. Kind of like how not NASA couldn't get to the moon anymore. Well, there's an easy explanation behind that, Stanley. President Nixon said that they weren't doing the Apollo program and they scrapped it, so they dropped the technology. And here's the same explanation for these houses. The lumber barons said they didn't want houses built like this anymore, so they dropped the technology. Yeah, I'm with you, Robert. It does look like it's an entirely different machine. And so that's what's interesting about a lot of these older houses that we look at. And here, looking at this image, this is why I really question what it's actually made out of. Is it really wood? Is it some combination of materials? And has it been renovated? Has it been changed? Has it been repainted? I mean, the images give us that impression, but who knows for sure? What the heck does this symbol actually represent? What's it alluding to? I have no idea. I mean, we have 3 orbs. We've seen the leaf motif before. You could really say that this is a more elaborate cartouche. But I mean, this is certainly far grander than all the very plain stars that you'll see affixed on all the houses built in the United States all over from the 1940s onwards. So hard to really say. Ah, yes, we do have plans. Again, single perspective plans, front elevation. Hey, that's all I need to build an incredible house, just single perspective plans. I know, I'm sure there's probably plans out there somewhere, and even if there weren't, somebody would have gone in there and sketched it from different perspectives and put it all together. I'm sure that's out there somewhere, but it's just interesting to think of this great Victorian house that defies all of our explanation, that seems to have had a very different appearance on the interior in the past. And so again, really posing that question, how and why was it changed over time? Is that a different manner or method of facading? Hey, Kirk, thank you very much. I appreciate that. And thank you for joining us. But that's what I really wonder when I look at these structures. Yeah, there you go. I am Kairos. Eureka, I found it. I'll tell you what, after we hit San Francisco, we'll head north to Eureka and take a look at this spaceship type house. It has F1 engines below it in the foundation, maybe. So, anyways. All right, that's all for that one. Now I've got another one that we haven't looked at before that I've been wanting to take a look at for a very long period of time. And this is the Royal Albert Hall in the great city of London. Now, I've been planning to do a London exploration for some time. I just haven't gotten to it yet. Now, very, very interesting. I know what you're going to say. Well, London, United Kingdom, it has a much longer history. It all makes sense. Yes, true. However, this Royal Albert Hall was constructed in 4 short years from 1867 to 1871. Oh, no, this is London. This is in London, the Royal Albert Hall. And I picked this image intentionally because you can really see what an elaborate structure, a rotunda structure. So, was it originally supposed to be one of those train rotundas maybe, or roundhouses as they called them? No. It was always supposed to be a concert hall. But you can see some of the intriguing detail in it, how it's really built in the ground, interestingly enough. And, gigantic performance hall decorated as such as the great opera houses. Look at all these figures here across this. Ah, yes, nothing says Great Britain in the 1860s like all these Greco-Roman deities that are all over the place, don't they? Yeah, again, not sure what to make of it, but that's what you got. And let's not forget all the impressive decorations on every single window, the very impressive columns. And again, only 4 years to bang this out, 1867 to 1871. So not our usual story that we have of Europe or United Kingdom, if United Kingdom's considering part of Europe or not, depending on who you ask today. But, Great Britain, London, very, very beautiful, impressive building. And they didn't build it over hundreds of years like Cologne Cathedral. Oh, no. It only took them 4 years. Let's take a look at some more images of this impressive structure. Ah, yes, the opening in 1871. We don't even have a photograph of it. We've got a very impressive drawing. So while we could have photos of the Crystal Palace years before this and of the Crimean War, which Great Britain participated in with France and others, we don't have a picture of the opening of the Royal Albert Hall. Why? Well, maybe they just didn't have a photographer available. I mean, it's only the capital city of Great Britain, United Kingdom, so why? I don't know. Yeah, that's a very good observation right there, Stanley. It does look like it sits lower than the street, which is very intriguing about it. I'm just intrigued that it just doesn't have any sort of picture with the opening. But there's plenty of modern pictures in high detail. And again, here you can see all the impressive figures that are all around it. So I don't know. Yes, official history says that Rome was in Great Britain in the distant past. It certainly wasn't the recent past. Although, if you watch The Last Kingdom, Uhtred was well aware of Rome, so it's very interesting, especially when they tell us they had to keep rediscovering Rome. So, was it just an error on a TV show, or is someone just playing fast and loose with history? I don't know. I'm not going to speculate, because I get in trouble when I speculate. Look at these little pediments over here. So just an impressive, interesting structure, and here you can see the interior of it. Now, I like this composite image here where you see what it looks like in the modern terms. But then you see an older image of the interior. Wonderful, massive organ. You get the feeling if a structure like this was built or founded, if you follow me, in the United States, might end up being a sports venue of some type. Like maybe if this was in Chicago, this is where the Blackhawks would play. Or, maybe it'd be where the Bulls would play until they built them the United Center. But, all kidding aside, very, very impressive and beautiful structure, and still stands today. And you can go see Eric Clapton perform there. He performs there frequently. But look at this interior. I mean, all this decoration, this interior, and this impressive structure banged out in 4 years, 1867 to 1871. So you see, banging out impressive structures, rapidly constructing them with beautiful ornate detail. That's not just in the United States. They could do it in Europe. They could do it in the United Kingdom. They could really do it anywhere. So anyway, yeah, I guess that's where you go for your tickets or something, or you're not allowed to go in there, but beautiful decorations. And then even just this hall, it might seem rather nondescript, but I mean, just looking at the floor and the way that it bends around with all the concentric doorways, just impressive design. And a simplistic design, and yet something that seems to be beyond what we'd expect to see with a structure like this. And when we consider what was going on in this time frame in the quote-unquote Victorian era. And of course, that'll be the other explanation behind it. It's the Victorian era. We could do whatever the heck we wanted to. Queen Victoria had her diamond jubilee, and that means anything was possible. Build a very impressive and wondrous performing hall that still stands today, and you can still go there to see Eric Clapton perform today, and you know it. It makes perfect sense. Or maybe it doesn't. Could anybody build this today? Thoughts? I know. Sometimes I crack myself up. Oh, there's a good comment from Vaughn. Like a particle accelerator almost. Yeah, who knows? Who knows what the original intention behind it was? Was it really meant for a large congregation of people? I'm not really sure. Thank you very much, New West Reset. I appreciate that. But those are the kinds of questions that I always ask, and Heidi's got an answer. Nope. Yeah, and I don't think you're going to see anybody attempt this today. And so, what do these figures represent? Were they just being gregarious at that time? Was it artistic expression if we go with the official history? I mean, it's not just in Great Britain and the United States. They were doing this all over the place with these, how shall we say, idealized, almost godlike figures that we see all over our public buildings and our performing buildings and everything else. So, not sure, but definitely something that I have added to my list for an on-site when I do get my happy booty back over to the United Kingdom. Anyway, so I got a few leftovers that I want to show you, a few examples of how facading occurs. Now, this might be a little upsetting, so I'm just going to preface it with that because of some of the things that you're going to see. And it might surprise you to know that this is happening. I'll admit it surprises me. So here we have the famous Pantheon in Greece, not to be confused with the Pantheon in Nashville, although they do have a very nice and fine Pantheon in Nashville, Tennessee. But very interesting to see that there is scaffolding on it. So how much, I'm just asking the question here, and it's a rhetorical question, but something for you to consider. How much alteration, how much renovation has been done to the mighty Pantheon over the years? How do we really know how old it is? And does it really reflect the history as we understand it to be? It's interesting to me that something that should be very, very protected and very safeguarded is still being renovated. It's just interesting. No, that's not what's going to upset you. All right, this is just the start. Now here we have the Colosseum. And the Colosseum in Rome has been repaired, altered, repatched many times over the years. So what's original? What's been added over time? What's been repainted? What's been redecorated? The answer is, I don't know. And maybe that seems to be the intention. Nobody really knows. Because with the passage of time, who actually keeps the records in terms of which arch was renovated, which arch was repainted, which arch was resurfaced, what materials are different, why do they look different? I don't know. Or is it all authentic? You can go to the Colosseum and interface with it as well as you can. You can still get really, really close to it. But can you really figure out exactly what the mystery is behind who did what when? It becomes very confusing over time. And that's even if we had a coherent history, even if we actually had a professional class of people whose only job in life was to take records and preserve them. We, of course, do not. We attribute that either to our governments or the media. And, how they keep records. Well, there's all kinds of consternation about how that happens. The media has a message. The government has an intention. They don't even have to be up to any sort of shenaniganry when it comes to conspiracies. Information could just be lost inadvertently by mistake. Man, as Leo says it, very, very intentionally confusing. And who knows, Vaughn may be right. Who knows how it changes with the time shifts? If we have alternating realities or if we have overlapping realities, again, going beyond our one physical reality. Many different theories. I don't really close the book on anything here because there's really no need to. Yes, here in Notre Dame in France, after the unfortunate recent fire and the renovations that have been done there, the alterations. Of course, there was a terrible fire, But again, it's the same sequence of events, is it not? Now, again, it could just all be a mighty coincidence. All these years, centuries, we always have disasters that occur, accidents, unfortunate fires, large conflagrations that wipe out cities, and pinpoint fires that only affect single buildings. But the result is the same. There are damages and we have to repair and renovate them. So what's really been lost? How is the actual structure changed? Think back to the way the towers are missing from those courthouses in the Midwest. Think back to how the Call building was transitioned into Central Tower and they scrammed 6 domes. It all comes up and it all applies. So moving on past Notre Dame, we have this incredible structure in the Venice Exploration St. Mark. And interestingly enough, St. Mark has been renovated many times, they say, and they even go so far as to say that these horses they snagged from their attack on when it was called Constantinople. That was the 4th Crusade, according to the official history. Yes, that's right. The city of Venice was responsible for launching the 4th Crusade that targeted Constantinople. That's what the official history says. Before the city was renamed Istanbul. Same city, different name, but very, very interesting. So is that a method of facading? Giving us a historical account. Is it possible that these horses were already there? And I know it seems like minutia and a very minor detail, but it becomes a significant detail if your entire life you saw this building and you remember these 4 horses being there. Well, the horses, it said they came from Constantinople. What's today Istanbul from the 4th Crusade? So they're not organic to the building. But what if they really were? Just that little detail suddenly changes the context of everything. And it's another manner in which facading can happen. Now, yes, I always say the official history can be correct, but that's quite a lot of detailed official history from, about 700, 600 years ago that we know exactly what happened, right down to where these 4 horses came from. Much like that obelisk that they brought up from Egypt and parked out in front of the Vatican, because apparently that was an easy thing to do, right? The things that they tell us. And so moving on past St. Mark. Yes. This one really gets my gander. Look at this. Modernization of Antwerp, of course. And so what you have here is what appears to be a bona fide old world building. And it's not even that elaborate of an old world building, I'll be honest. I mean, it's got some of the remaining elaborate touches on it. But clearly it's been renovated over time. But yes, let's put this modern extension on it. Now, granted, even if this wasn't a genuine old world building, we do know that we've seen this example happening before. So, we can't say that Boston is the worst of the transgressors for doing this. And let's be honest, everybody's doing this all over the land. It's not one city. But these are the kind of things that you see. Don't pay any attention to the building. Pay attention to this. Yeah, Julia says it really well here. Yikes, that they just put on top of it. Yeah, you're right, my bailiwick zone. Why would anybody do something like this? Why would anybody even think to do something like this? What's the purpose? What's the intention? Well, clearly all eyes are directed towards this extension that's built up there that's made out of incredible glass. Yeah, there you go, F in the chat. They made it better. That's exactly what they'll say too. It's more efficient. It's more modern. Alina says correctly, it's ugly, but it's not. It's its own style. Good one there, Griff's report. It looks like a sledgehammer. Yeah, I'd agree. Yeah, you're right, Michael. Ignore that man behind the curtain. But these are the examples that we have all over the place. The ways that things are hidden, the concealment, the facading, if you will. Yeah, you're right, Vaughn. It does look like something out of A Clockwork Orange or 1984. This is the Ministry of Truth. Yes. Have I ever told you how much I admire people who say they're all about the truth? Because the Ministry of Truth said they were about the truth. So someone has to tell you they're a truth seeker. You might want to perk your ears up. I don't know. Just a little advice. But anyway, so moving on past the Ministry of Truth here, then we also see the other building renovation that's occurring at the old Forum in Rome. Yes. So again, posing that question, what's original? What's been altered? How has it been altered? Or is it just scaffolding that's being put up to make us think things are being altered? You may recall that with building number 1 on the channel, the Iowa State Capitol, I reference how there's always scaffolding seen, but there never seems to be any effective work done. And you try asking the contractors what they're actually doing, and typically they'll tell you, well, it's all about some sort of cleaning. Even though they tell you that these schlocky old world structures are on the verge of falling down, and if it wasn't for our renovation efforts, they would collapse next week, if not sooner. At least that's what we see. There you go. I'm Kairos. I see substructure. Absolutely. But that's what we have. That's what's happened here. And then this Alexander Palace Theater. This is a very interesting one because you can actually see some alterations that have been done over time. So again, what's original here? You can get the impression that this was once a very opulent, ornate, and beautiful theater, but it's been changed over time. Was that due to the process of degradation, decay, or was it due to some other sort of renovation? Some very interesting sun symbols here and motifs that still survive in the wall and some decorations. And again, this is just another example. Look at the ceiling. Very, very impressive that the ceiling seems to survive in its intact form. And this could really be any structure anywhere on any of the inhabited lands, or at least the inhabited lands that we know about. And this is what you'll get. And then last but not least, the Victorian era University of Liverpool. I still have a big, huge exploration on Liverpool and London that I'm going to be doing. I'm going to get those assembled and redone here shortly. But, universities, for whatever reason, I'm just not really supposed to explore them, apparently, because people find them boring, I guess. But in this particular example, you can see this very, very impressive structure. And they do have multiple perspectives on the plan, so credit where credit's due. And the clock tower seems to have survived. For whatever reason, universities seem to preserve the old world a little bit more, at least the structures that survive. But again, on a long enough timeline, you see the same process occurring. So, as always, make of it what you will. Well, that's all I have for examples. I hope you enjoyed this exploration. And before you depart, just please ask that you hit the like button and appreciate everybody for being here and supporting the channel. And this has been a very enjoyable exploration. I haven't exactly decided what next week's topic is going to be. It's narrowed down between two, so I guess I will surprise you and let you know tomorrow what our live stream for next Saturday is going to be. But we're back to our Saturday live streams at 8 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, so get that on your calendar. Put your personal reminders out there. It's the time of technical glitches, May, for whatever reason. But I hope you enjoyed this, and we're going to be deep diving in a little bit of a very extensive mystery that we've only started to scratch the surface of. But I've actually found some answers to it, so I think I'm going to hit that. So thank you, everybody, for joining. This is Lucius Aurelian signing off. Everybody have a great week wherever you are.